Hello everybody, you have tuned in to Eric Jose on Making a Murderer on YouTube. I cover virtually any aspect of making a murderer. I go over the evidence, the documents, the photos. So if you like, stay tuned, and in the future I'll have many more videos besides the one you're about to see. Hello there, ladies and gents. Okay, hey, today we're here to talk a little bit more about Michael Funk. Well, in terms of a letter that was written to somebody close to Michael from Brad Schimel. So we're going to be talking about Brad Schimel today. There's going to be a fair amount of, Eagle Nation, Avery, Dassey crossover in this video. Y'all know I don't like Brad Schimel. Y'all know I call him Brad Schimey Sham Schimel. That's because that's what he is. He's a total sham, that guy. Absolutely, just piece of work, that guy. Y'all know that he was a very integral part of keeping Brendan locked up and standing in the way of Brendan getting his habeas relief, right? So we all remember that. Brad Schimel's he's just, I've never found anything that he's done that I actually like or agree with. But that may be because I haven't looked hard enough. But I have found several times instances where I have issue with them. Number one, this email we're going to see here today, I have a little bit of an issue with. I don't necessarily disagree with Brad Schimel and what he says in the email I'm going to show you, but I think he's doing it in an underhanded way, what he's saying. And then number two, I have a bone to pick with the fact that he actually expresses an opinion about Hoffer, but there's no follow-up on that. There's nothing actually at all to indicate he actually feels that way. And I'm going to talk about that. So, Brad Schimel's the one that was, after Brendan won in the 7th Circuit with the 3-judge panel, he's the one that was getting in the press and saying he was gonna appeal this erroneous decision to the 7th, to the en banc, 7th Circuit en banc, and folks, you know how hard it is to get an en banc review? It's easier to get in front of SCOTUS than it is to get an en banc review, And yeah, so after losing in the district, federal court, after losing in the circuit federal court in the 3-judge panel, he talks about it's an erroneous decision, throws this Hail Mary asking for an en banc review, and gets it. And then what happens? One judge mysteriously, retires and isn't part of the en banc hearing, and leaving only 7 judges there. Had that judge stayed and had that judge went in Brendan's favor, Brendan would have won. A tie would have gone in Brendan's favor because he had already won twice previously. So that's what's so sneaky or so slimy about this whole thing. You just don't, you're not sure what's happening and what's going on with all this stuff, but they clearly, barely overturned the decision 4-3. Okay? And they did that mainly by clinging and cowering behind AEDPA. Seriously. So that was all thanks to Brad Schimel, who claims that he cares about, the community, kids and victims and whatever. Well, guess what, dude? Brendan Dassey's a victim, Brad. And you dropped the ball. And now you're gone. Now we got Josh Call. But the point is, now you're gone. Maybe you should have been paying attention to these people that were writing you letters and maybe giving them a little less lip service and a little more help. Because, and that's going to bring me to the Michael Bell case. Another one where Brad Schimel comes out looking like a turd. Okay? Michael Bell, his son, Michael Bell Jr., was actually killed in his own driveway. He pulled up to the house and was getting ready to come up into the house, and some cops came up behind him for some reason, which has not really been fully explained. Came up behind him, and he got out of his car and was walking up the driveway, and they pounced on him and everything, and he kind of was resisting because he didn't know what was going on. And then one of the cops' guns had gotten caught on a side view mirror of a car where they were wrestling with the kid, and the side view mirror was making him feel like that something was going on with his gun. So he immediately says that he's grabbing my gun, At which point, one of the other officers pulls out his gun and shoots the kid. Well, it's in fact wasn't that way. In fact, what this officer felt pulling on his gun was actually the side view mirror of the car, and everything. And there's never been really a sufficient explanation as to why they were pouncing on him in the driveway like this to begin with. So that's another case. So Michael Bell was able to, he got a settlement over this, and he used all that money to help push something through legislation, to push a piece of legislation through, to talk with lawmakers, and he did, and he was able to get a piece of legislation passed. And that legislation now prevents any agency, any law enforcement agency in Wisconsin, if there is an officer involved shooting, no longer can an agency investigate itself. It has to be an outside agency that comes in to investigate, so that there's what's called independent investigations. That's what Michael Bell fought for. And so he gets the legislation passed, and after he does that, he takes the legislation or whatever, he goes to see Brad Schimel and says, I'd like for you to do an independent investigation into what happened to my son, because there's, folks, I'll leave the link to my video I did about it below. You're just going to see there's so much, the case is such a mess. There's actually somebody who's recently done a Reddit post about the Michael Bell case as well. So, it's out there for you guys to hear about and understand. It's another case in Wisconsin. And so when he goes to Brad Schimel asking for the independent investigation, Brad Schimel tells him no. Just says, nope. Sorry, nope. Not going to do it. And that's it. That's Brad Schimel. That's his legacy. Okay? Says he cares about victims' families. No, he doesn't. He only cares about victims' families when he's cowering behind the hall box so that he doesn't have to deal with the very uncomfortable questions that he's getting from reporters and stuff like that about Brendan. It's whenever he's getting faced with difficult or uncomfortable questions, he suddenly then is hiding behind the hall box skirts. Suddenly then it's all about the victims, and he cares about the victims and blah, 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 when he needs to hide behind them to shield him from uncomfortable questions, right? That's the way that's Brad Schimel. So, all right. So today we're talking about Brad Schimel. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at this email here that Brad Schimel sent in regards to Michael Funk, and then we'll come
Okay, so this is an email to somebody, regarding the case, somebody who had written to Brad Schimel. This is an email from Brad Schimel, and it basically says, this is regarding the Michael Funk case. And it says, I understand that you are upset, and that is okay. I am not writing to try to change your mind, but I just wanted to address a couple of things that I think you have misunderstood about the situation. Shelley Rush did not leave our office. I am not sure what you meant by that. She absolutely did not rush through the reports. She has been working diligently to carefully go through all the reports and evidence for several months. She had all of the statements, including those from the hostages. I did not talk about the statements of the hostages because in making my decision, I could only take into account the information known to the officers, and they had not talked with any of the hostages. There were the two men in the basement who were communicating with 911 dispatcher, and some of that information was being relayed to the officers, but because they were in the basement, they had very limited information. One thing that was relayed was Mr. Arato's statements about there being only one gun in the building, because he believed that Mr. Funk did not carry his gun at work, since Mr. Arato is a convicted felon. He was obviously wrong about that, but that was one of the factors that contributed to the belief that the man who came running out of the back door was not a hostage, because the only gun in the building was supposed to be in the hands of the hostage taker. Yeah, but you see him pulling that gun out in the alley. The hostage taker wouldn't have been pulling his gun out in the alley. Anyway, all right. Anyway. Sorry. Okay. I am aware of the video that depicts Officer Hoffer laughing. That did not occur prior to entering the building. Rather, that was after all the gunfire had occurred. The events after the shooting of Mr. Funk could not be used to determine whether the officers were acting reasonably at the time they shot Mr. Funk. That video would not be admissible at a criminal trial because it took place after the fact. I will tell you candidly that I was shocked when I saw the video of Officer Hoffer laughing. I understand what the city attorney is saying about the psychological expert they hired to assess that video, but it is still very troubling to witness that video. Even if he had actually shot the hostage taker, the taking of a human life is a tragedy, period. Really, Brad? Interesting. After a review of all the statements and video of audio evidence, I am convinced the officers believed they were ambushed when they entered. I did my best to explain all of the relevant circumstances in as much detail as I could, but I know that the legal standards are complicated. For what it is worth, as I told Mrs. Funk and their daughter, I have been riding Harleys for nearly 25 years and have put over 100,000 miles on with my biker friends, who are some of the best people I have ever known. I spent the day with some of them today. Many of my very closest friends look an awful lot like ML and the others at Eagle Nation. I have absolutely no doubt about those who have asserted that ML is a wonderful person. What happened to him and his family and friends is heartbreaking. In the end, we simply could not overcome the privilege of self-defense that the officers would be entitled to assert at trial. It would be my responsibility to prove that they did not believe they were in danger of death or great bodily harm. And given all the circumstances, even though they were wrong, their belief was legally reasonable. And that's essentially correct. It's hard. I mean, I'm conflicted in this particular instance because obviously Hoffer shouldn't have been there. But in a situation like this, when lives are on the line and adrenaline's flowing and that sort of stuff, and a mistake like this is understandable normally. But the problem here is I think that Brad Schimel is talking out of both sides of his face, or both sides of his mouth, whatever. Anyway, but I'll get to that in a minute. I appreciate your willingness to write me to express your frustration, and even though we will probably never see eye to eye on the result in this matter, I appreciate that you took time to share your thoughts. Brad Schimel. Okay, so a couple things here. Number one, he's basically pointing out that there was only supposed to be one gun on scene. Well, okay, I get it. That's fine. So the gun would be in the hand of the hostage taker, right? So, like I just said a minute ago, do we really honestly believe that the hostage taker would have been running out of the building and then would have been taking his gun out in the alley? I mean, realistically, is that believable? Is that plausible in any way, shape, or form? So there's that. Then there's the part where he talks about the fact that what Hoffer did was wrong and him laughing is very disturbing and all those things he's saying, and he's saying that he would like to pursue it, but he knows that it's basically pointless or futile because he knows that the courts are going to end up siding with the officers, and they're going to look the way the courts are going to look at it. He knows that he doesn't feel he can make a case against the officers. That's what he's telling Miss Reitz, right? So this is what he's saying, that he just doesn't think he has a case. He doesn't think he could build the case, and that the officers would eventually be, they would be found not guilty essentially because of the way that it would be analyzed, that it would most likely be found to be reasonable. Well, that's interesting. I mean, you honestly think that Hoffer, or well, at least you give the impression here that you honestly believe that Hoffer laughing was very disturbing, and that taking of any human life is a tragedy, as you put it, right? Even if it was the hostage taker, right? Taking of any human life is not something to be celebrating about, right? Or laughing about. So let me ask you this, Brad. Why didn't you at least stand in the way of him getting an award for it? If you were truly disturbed by Officer Hoffer laughing after killing, how did you not stand in the way of him getting an award for this and thinking what he did was good? Yeah, there's just a lot of stuff here that I feel is disingenuous. And in the part when he starts talking about him riding Harleys and his friends and a lot of his friends looking awful lot like ML and blah, 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 I was just like, oh my God, dude. I just, that to me came off as so just fake. And like, I have no doubt he probably has a Harley, and I have no doubt he probably has some guys that he rides with, and he may have a guy that looks like ML, but for him to say that, many of his very closest friends look an awful lot like ML, maybe he's telling the truth, but I just feel like that is just, like he's trying to, cultivate a bond, by saying, look, I'm a motorcycle rider too, kind of thing. I don't know. It just comes off really, I don't know what you guys think, but to me, it just comes off really douchey, personally. But, I mean, when it comes down to it here, I understand what Brad is saying. And I understand what Brad is saying about he feels it would be very difficult to build a case against Hoffer, and in a way that the way it would be reviewed, that he could actually have a chance of winning. He's basically saying he knows that the way this would get reviewed, that ultimately the jury is going to side with the officers, that Brad Schimel is not going to be able to prove that they weren't in danger, because it was a whole hostage situation and everything. Obviously there was shots being fired. So no jury is going to say, oh, no, that was a perfectly safe situation. That's essentially the way that's going to go. And that's what he's alluding to here. And that's why I say I can understand that. But can I believe anything he's saying here? Is, especially when he says that he was disturbed by Officer Hoffer laughing, but yet did nothing to reprimand Hoffer in any way. Nobody does anything. No, they give him an award. The state of Wisconsin gives him an award for disobeying 2 direct orders not to go back. And he gets an award. So that's the duplicity here. That's what I'm talking about. This is a disingenuous, undercurrent in this email here from Brad Schimel.
All right. So the thing that I found most interesting in that little email there, folks, is where he talks about Hoffer. And he basically says that Hoffer is like laughing on the video and stuff, and all those things are inexcusable or whatever and all that, and those sort of things. Like he's saying that he completely disagrees with that, and that it's improper and everything. But yet, what did he do? What did he do about it? Obviously, okay, fine, Brad, I get it. You couldn't prosecute. Okay, yeah, you felt like you couldn't build a case. Got it. Okay. You couldn't have done anything else as the Attorney General? There's nothing you could have done? Nothing? You couldn't prevent him from getting an award? You couldn't possibly send him in for re-education training of some sort to get him so he gets his head on straight and realizes that he has to follow orders when he's ordered to stand down after he's been shot? I mean, whatever it takes. But, like, did you try anything else besides trying to prosecute? I mean, was there any other option that ever entered into your brain? I'm just curious. So, as I said, Brad Schimel is like, one of the most disingenuous people. I mean, that whole thing there, that whole email, he's just, what it tells me? What it tells me when he's talking about Hoffer and how he says it's inexcusable and that sort of stuff, but then marries no action to that statement, doesn't do anything, allows Hoffer to end up getting an award for it and all these various things. Am I supposed to believe that you really believe what you wrote in that email? Or is that just lip service? You're just telling this person what you think they want to hear, but you actually believe that Hoffer's a good guy? Because you even went as far as to say he shouldn't have been acting that way, even if it was the hostage taker. That he shouldn't have been laughing and celebrating. That all human life is sacred, basically, right? But yet you did nothing. You claim to feel this way, and you did nothing. Nothing. Now, I'm not saying, obviously you couldn't prosecute, but you had to have some kind of other options, Brad. There should have been something else you could have done as the Attorney General of Wisconsin, in charge of the DOJ, the Department of Justice, right? So that's really what gets me about this email, is how it's really so disingenuous. And then when he gets into talking about how I have a Harley too, and you know, I put 100,000 miles on it. I've got many friends that look like ML and the other guys at the bike shop there. It's like, wait. You have friends that look like him? Only look like him, Brad? Why wouldn't you just say I ride with many friends that are like Michael or the guys at the motorcycle shop? The reason why you didn't say that, Brad, is because you are up in your ivory tower, okay? And you are looking down your nose at these bikers at Eagle Nation. Let's be honest. You know what I mean? Let's be genuine about it, Brad. Because the way to word that would have been, I have many friends like Michael, or not that look like. You're just trying to say they look like? I'm sorry. That whole part seems disingenuous to me as well. It just seems like he's trying to initiate like a bond, like between like bikers or something like that, and and whatever. It just it doesn't land in my opinion. But maybe other people disagree. Maybe other people think it lands well. I don't. But especially after the part about Hoffer, and I know that he never did anything about that. So it's like, okay, I just read one lie. So this is probably another one, right? Where he's talking about his sympathy and that and blah, 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 blah. But, hey, maybe his sympathy was heartfelt. Maybe it was genuine. So we'll go ahead and leave that at the by and by, right? So, but, I mean, it's just so many things about that email. And like I said, folks, Brad Schimel, the Michael Bell case. Like I said, I'm going to leave a link to a video down below. People, go check that video out and see what happened with the Michael Bell case and what happened to his son and stuff. And what Brad Schimel, the way Brad Schimel basically slammed the door in that dad's face, that grieving father's face. Remember how he's all about the victim's family, right? He's all about the victims, right? And what the victims want. No, that's not true. He only cares about the victims when he's hiding behind their skirts to shield himself from uncomfortable questions, like he did with Brendan Dassey repeatedly. That's the only time he cares about victims, because he gave not a care about Michael Bell and refused the independent investigation that Michael Bell had fought so hard for to get the legislation passed, and he just flat out refused him. So Brad Schimel is a piece of work. He is, and now he's gone. Hey, guess what, Brad? Maybe it's not such a mystery why you're gone. You know what I mean? You've done some pretty slimy things, dude. You know that? Standing in the way of Brendan Dassey, the poor 16-year-old kid who was befuddled and coerced by Tom Fassbender and Mark Wiegert, and you stand by that. You seem to have no problem with that. You know what I mean? You claim you care about the victims' families. No, I don't think you do. I don't. And I think Michael Bell proves that. And then I think Michael Bell helps prove just how much, when you claim to care about the Hallbox, what you really cared about back then was hiding behind their skirts. Hiding behind them to shield you from uncomfortable questions. Anyways, all right. So, I just wanted to share that with everybody today. That's, Brad Schimel, who is obviously, up until about, 6-8 months ago or so, or, well, whatever it was, 6 months ago, Brad Schimel was the Attorney General there in Wisconsin. He's not now. Josh Call is now in there. But this guy, Brad Schimel, this is the guy right here who's been, the guy in the hot seat, I guess you might say, or in the big chair, as it were, up until about, like I said, about 6 months ago when the election happened. So, Brad Schimel, and it'll be interesting to see if Josh Call is going to basically hold Schimel's line, or if Josh Call is going to maybe take a little different attitude. I think maybe he should take a little different attitude, because Brad Schimel thought he was untouchable too. and he did disingenuous things like we saw here today, and he ended up out. So just something to think about, Josh. You might want to be less disingenuous than the previous AG. All right. If you haven't already, folks, please hit subscribe. We'll see you.